Hi there, this is Soft Philosophy for Sleep. Tonight, we are not just falling asleep, we are stepping into a journey of discovering our inner self. There are nights when you lie in the darkness and wonder, why does my mind keep spinning? Why do I feel lost, even when life looks completely normal on the outside? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." We spend our entire lives chasing external goals, yet we forget to listen to the inner world, where our fears, desires, memories, and the forgotten selves are kept hidden. Tonight, you won't face your mind with heaviness anymore. You will learn to look at it gently. You will understand your shadow, the parts inside you that you try to hide. You will see your persona, the mask you wear for the world. And you will touch the self, the center of your soul. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Tonight, we will sleep and awaken at the same time. Are you ready? Section 1. The Quiet Beginning. Why Jung Went into the Mind. Hi there. Let me tell you a story that doesn't begin with the noise of the world, but with the silence of a mind waking up. Carl Gustav Jung did not enter the inner world out of curiosity. He entered because of deep loneliness. During his early years, Jung never felt like he belonged anywhere. He was born into a pastor's family, a household filled with rules, teachings, and expectations, yet too rigid and heavy for a sensitive child to blend into. In his memories, Jung said that he had felt, from a very young age, that two people existed within him. One, an ordinary boy, and the other, a silent, ancient, dignified presence, as if it had existed long before he was born. Have you ever felt that way? As if there is a very different part living inside you, observing you, questioning everything. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And his journey to become himself began with a battle, not with the world, but with his own inner reality. The first fear, not the darkness, but your own thoughts. As a teenager, Jung had strange dreams about ancient forces and symbolic images, what he later called archetypes. In one dream, Jung saw all of Europe submerged under the sea, with only Switzerland remaining above the water. He didn't know how to explain it. He only knew that his mind was trying to tell him something. One day, he came across Kant's statement, "Nothing can be known except what appears in consciousness." But Jung sensed something was wrong, because his dreams didn't appear in consciousness. They came from somewhere else, from beneath. He decided to go there. The moment he realized, within us is not just psychology, it is a universe. In his writings, Jung said, "The psyche is not of today. It reaches back into prehistoric ages. Our psyche is not just a stream of daily thoughts. Inside you lies the history of thousands of generations. The memories, instincts, fears, and desires you think are yours are actually the voice of humanity." Jung called this place the collective unconscious. When you fear abandonment, when you crave recognition, when you dream of running alone through a dark forest, that is not just your personal problem. It is the echo of millions of souls who have existed before you. The silence that called him, It wasn't fame he was seeking. It wasn't a desire to write books. It was, as he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Psychology, for Jung, was a path toward liberation. He felt deeply the conflict between either the outer world, where everyone wants you to fit in, and the inner world, where your soul screams for meaning. Jung didn't want to live just to be correct. He wanted to live to be authentic. Haven't you felt that way too? You work hard, you follow what society expects, but in your heart, you ask yourself, is this truly the life I want? The boldest decision, walking away from Freud. Freud introduced Jung to the world of psychoanalysis. For years, they were like mentor and disciple, friends who shared the same revolutionary dream. But there was one thing Jung could never agree with. Freud believed that human motivation originates from sexual instinct. Jung felt something different. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. We do not act only out of desire. We act because of the pain longing to be healed. Freud saw the mind as a machine. Jung saw the mind as a soul. And a soul cannot be reduced to a biological formula. So Jung chose his own path, a lonely path, criticized, attacked, misunderstood. But that was the moment modern psychology changed forever. The journey into the self. After parting ways with Freud, Jung sank into years of deep inner crisis. He began recording his dreams, speaking with the darkness in his mind, and experimenting with what he later called active imagination. Conscious dialogue with the unconscious. He stepped into his own shadow. A famous quote was born from this period. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It means this: you cannot become better just by thinking about the light. You must be willing to look at what you are avoiding. The wounds you try to forget, the mistakes you don't want to mention, the desires you hide in the deepest part of yourself, that is the shadow. The beginning of awareness, facing the truth. Jung discovered something that you and I often refuse to admit. We are not afraid of the world. We are afraid of our true selves. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. We trade ourselves for approval. We trade desire for acceptance. We trade the soul for applause. But deep down, you know, you were not born to be a version that pleases others. You were born to be yourself." Why did Jung go so deeply into the mind? Not to study it, but because he believed your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. He wanted to answer the greatest question a human can ask. Who am I? Not, what job do I have? Not, what title do I carry? Not, whose expectations am I living for? But rather, who am I beneath all these masks? He called this journey individuation, the process of becoming yourself, the process of becoming who you truly are. And that is also why you are here, not to listen to philosophy, but to return to yourself. Tonight, as you close your eyes, I want you to remember Jung's words. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. You've spent enough time dreaming with the outside world. Now, it's time to awaken with the inner world. Let sleep take you into that journey. Let your soul speak in the language it knows, dreams. We continue. The next step is the unconscious, the hidden world beneath your thoughts. Section 2. The unconscious, the hidden world beneath your thoughts. Are you still here? We just went through the quiet beginning, where Jung's journey started not from ambition, but from loneliness and the desire to understand himself. And when he faced the darkness of his own mind, he realized something even more mysterious than fear. In each of us there is another whom we do not know. There is an other living inside you. Another you, watching your life from beneath the surface of consciousness. Welcome to the world of the unconscious. We often believe we understand ourselves. We think we act for logical reasons. We take pride in our ability to make rational decisions. But Jung discovered something completely different. Most of what controls your life does not live in consciousness. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You think you chose that relationship. You think you chose that job. You think you fear failure because you are careful. But in reality, the unconscious often chooses first, and then consciousness finds reasons to justify that choice. In other words, you are not living as you want. You are living based on what inside you has not yet been healed. The unconscious is not darkness. It is simply the part of you that hasn't been seen. Jung didn't view the unconscious as a place filled with evil or negativity. On the contrary, he believed it holds intuition, creativity, healing, life force, and the power to transform. But to enter it, you must be willing to stop the noise of the outer world and listen to the call within. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. We do everything. Get busier, work harder, scroll longer, just to avoid looking into the emptiness inside. Because returning to ourselves is terrifying. You are not afraid of darkness. You are afraid of what the darkness wants to tell you. In the previous part, we talked about the moment Jung realized he could no longer live as the expected version of himself. When he stopped and listened, he met chaos. He wrote, "The psyche is not of today. It reaches back into prehistoric ages. Within you exists the entire history of humankind. The fears you think are uniquely yours are not yours alone. The pain you cannot explain does not belong only to you. They are echoes of the collective unconscious." Why did Jung call the unconscious the world beneath? Because everything you try to bury goes there. Grief, childhood wounds, shame you never dared to speak of, desires you were taught you're not allowed to have. All of it gathers into images and symbols in your dreams, what Jung called the language of the soul. The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. Dreams are not meaningless. Dreams are a hidden door. Every night, your psyche sends a signal, whispering, "There is something inside you waiting to be seen." When you suppress emotions, they don't disappear. They become the unconscious. A simple example: you're angry, but you suppress it. You're sad, but you say you're fine. You're scared, but you pretend to be strong. You suppress, day after day. Your consciousness may be strong, but your unconscious is stubborn. It forgets nothing. And then one day, you break down over something tiny. You explode over something insignificant. You panic over a simple decision. Not because the situation is important, but because the unconscious finally rises to the surface. Like Jung said, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. Consciousness, awakening, is born from pain, not avoidance. Humans don't grow through knowledge. We grow through facing. Facing the truth that you are not okay. Facing the child inside you who was once hurt. Facing what you buried because you were afraid people would see your weakness. But Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't heal by painting your pain pink. You heal by looking at it and saying, I see you. I am here. How the unconscious controls your life. The unconscious does not speak in words. It speaks through intuition, intense emotions, strange coincidences, synchronicity, dreams. For example, you accidentally meet the person who hurt you the most. Or you keep repeating the same type of relationship. Cold people, unavailable people, people you have to prove your worth to. That is not bad luck. That is the unconscious pushing you into the same lesson until you finally see it. The unconscious does not want you to suffer. The unconscious wants you to awaken. And here is the final truth. You cannot run from the unconscious, but you can walk with it. Jung said, in each of us there is another whom we do not know. But he also said something even more important. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. You will meet yourself again in every turning point, in every failure, in every seemingly random encounter. Life is a mirror. The unconscious is the one holding the mirror. At this point, you have already seen the lower layer of your mind, the place where the things you avoid eventually find their way to you. And now, it's time to go deeper. Next is the part Jung called the true essence of what you avoid. The shadow, meeting the parts of yourself you avoid. If you're ready to explore the darkness within yourself, just say, Section 3, the shadow, meeting the parts of yourself you avoid. We have just walked through the door that leads down into the unconscious, where Jung discovered that most of our life is guided by what we don't see. But deeper still, in the darkest corner of the psyche, Jung found a presence that every one of us carries, a figure we don't want to face. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is not something to fear. It is the part of you that you deliberately forgot. The shadow is the name Jung gave to everything we reject about ourselves. The fears we never speak of. The desires we think we shouldn't have. The painful memories we've buried. The traits we feel ashamed of. Not because they're bad, but because we don't know how to face them. Jung wrote, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The more we deny the shadow, the more power it gains over us. Have you ever caught yourself exploding over something small? Or disliking someone without knowing why? or forcing yourself to be good, perfect, polite, until you're exhausted. That is the shadow at work. How does the shadow form? From childhood, we are taught, don't be angry. You must behave. Don't say that. Every time we were judged, rejected, or looked at with disappointment, we pushed a part of ourselves into the darkness. A child who is scolded for being angry learns to suppress emotions. A child who is criticized for expressing needs learns to stay silent. A child who is told, don't cry, learns that emotions are weakness, and so the shadow grows. Jung said, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. What parents do not face, children will carry. The shadow is not just negativity. We often think the shadow equals bad. That's not true. The shadow contains all the parts of you that you were too afraid to express, even the beautiful ones. Your creativity, when someone told you, drawing has no future. Your confidence, when others said, don't be arrogant. Your dreams, when people laughed and called them unrealistic. Sometimes the brightest part of you is the part hidden in the dark. Sit with that thought. When you run from the shadow controls you. Have you ever been angry at someone for something you secretly do yourself? Judged someone because they show what you're afraid to express? Felt uncomfortable seeing others live authentically? That is called projection. Jung defined it. Projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. We dislike others because they reveal the part of us we refuse to acknowledge. You don't hate them. You hate what you see of yourself through them. If you want freedom, face the shadow. Jung wrote, to confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. You cannot find the light by running away from the dark. Darkness is not the end of the path. It is the doorway. To open it, Jung introduced active imagination, a practice of sitting down, closing your eyes, allowing images and emotions from the unconscious to rise, and talking to them, without judgment, without trying to control, just observing. Try asking your shadow, what do you want to tell me? You'll be surprised. The shadow doesn't want to hurt you. It just wants to be seen. The shadow equals a misunderstood protector. Someone who becomes angry is not bad. They are someone who has gone unheard for too long. Someone who acts selfishly is not incapable of love. They are someone who hasn't received enough love. Someone who avoids emotions is not cold. They are someone who once got hurt when they opened their heart. The shadow is not the enemy. The shadow is the forgotten child within you, longing to be acknowledged. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Self-acceptance is the bravest act. You meet your shadow through relationships. Have you ever noticed you attract the same type of person over and over? Someone distant, someone who doesn't value you, someone who makes you feel not enough. That is not coincidence. The unconscious is leading you back to the old wound, so you can heal it. Jung wrote, we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. We don't meet the wrong person. We meet the part of ourselves that is still unhealed. How to face the shadow. 1. Bachelor about your emotions. Not, I'm fine, but I'm hurting and that's okay. 2. Polishing yourself. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. 3. Flash. Let the shadow speak. Journal and ask, what do you need from me? When you allow yourself to listen, you begin to reconcile with who you are. The shadow is a child calling for help. If you asked Jung what the greatest struggle of the human soul is, he would say, it is not about finding the light. It is about having the courage to face the darkness within ourselves. I'd rather be whole than good. Jung didn't want to be good. He wanted to be whole. And wholeness comes only when we acknowledge every part of ourselves, even the part we fear the most. The shadow teaches you something profound. You cannot heal what you refuse to look at. But there is another force shaping your life, quieter, more subtle. Not the things you suppress inside, but the image you use to hide yourself from the world. That is the persona, the mask you wear for the world. If you are ready to continue this Jungian journey, say, Section 4, the persona, the mask you wear for the world. We have just stepped out of the darkness of the shadow, where all the parts we tried to deny were stored. But the journey into the human psyche doesn't stop there, because it's not only the parts we hide that shape our lives, but also the parts we display. Jung called that layer the persona. The persona, the mask we wear for the world. The persona is the social mask each of us wears when we face the world, not to deceive, but to adapt. At work, you wear the mask of the competent professional. With family, you wear the mask of the strong one. In relationships, you wear the mask of someone easygoing and fine. We cannot walk through society exposing our entire inner world at all times. The persona helps us fit in, connect, and survive. But the problem is, we begin to believe the mask is who we are. Jung described the persona this way. The persona is a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. The persona is both an impression and a shield. Where does the persona come from? As children, we were praised when we did what was right. We were scolded when we were different. And from that moment, we learned to become the most acceptable version of ourselves. We traded truth for love. A good child receives affection. A high achiever receives praise. A cheerful one receives acceptance. And our real emotions? We left them behind. When we grow up, the mask becomes our personal brand. People look at us and say, "You're so confident," while deep down we whisper, "If only you knew how afraid I am." We say, "It's okay, I'm fine." But inside, "Please, see me." Jung warned, the danger is that people become identical with their personas, the professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. We identify with the role we play the best. We become the role and forget the self. Exhaustion does not come from work. It comes from holding the mask. You are not tired because life is hard. You are tired because you have been performing. Strong, calm, successful, kind, perfect. You fear that if you show your vulnerability, you will lose love, respect, or your place in the world. You fear that if you remove the mask, no one will stay. But Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest privilege is not to be loved. It is to be yourself. The persona helps you survive, but doesn't help you live. The persona helps you adapt, but it becomes the cage that keeps you inside. You want to say no, but the persona forces you to say yes. You want to rest, but the persona says, push through. You want to cry, but the persona says, be strong. At some point, you can no longer tell which emotions are genuine and which belong to the performance. Jung wrote, "We are not what we know, but what we are willing to learn. We are not what we present. We are what we are willing to learn about ourselves." Do you recognize your persona? Ask yourself, if no one were watching, how would I live? If the answer is different from the life you have now, then the persona is leading you, not your heart. Persona plus shadow equals two sides of the same mirror. The persona equals what we show to be loved. The shadow equals what we hide to avoid being rejected. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." You cannot find your true self if you are still afraid of removing the mask. How to free yourself from the persona? Not by throwing the mask away, but by remembering it's just a mask. 3 steps Jung suggested. 1. Flash the role you are playing. Realize, this is my persona. It is not me. 2. Allow yourself to speak the truth. I'm tired. I need help. 3. Choose relationships where you don't have to perform. You belong only where you can be yourself. Jung emphasized, only the individual can experience his own life, and not a collective life. You were not born to fulfill others' expectations. You were born to fulfill your existence. We have seen the shadow equals the part you hide from the world. The persona equals the part you perform for the world. But there is still another part, a part that stands between these two extremes, trying to control everything through logic. Jung called this part the ego, the small I that thinks it controls everything. If you're ready to go further, to meet the small I that tries to protect you, yet is also the very thing that creates your suffering. Section 5. The ego, the small I that thinks it controls everything. We have just removed the mask of the persona. There, we saw how we become the version that others expect, instead of who we truly are. But between the persona and the deeper layers of the psyche, Jung discovered another presence, stronger, more stubborn, and convinced that it controls everything. Jung called it the ego. The ego is the subject of all personal acts of consciousness. The ego is the center of consciousness, the part you believe is me. It is the narrator in your mind, constantly creating stories about who you are. The ego, the small I that always wants to be the center. The ego is shaped by experience, memory, and the judgments others place on you. Someone says, "You're so talented." Your ego learns to survive through achievement. Someone says, "Don't be annoying." Your ego learns to shrink. Someone says, "You're lovable only when you behave." Your ego learns to be perfect. And then, the ego creates its identity. I am my success. I am my role. I am what others think of me. Jung said, the ego wants to always be important and to play the biggest role. The ego always wants to be the main character, always wants to steer life in the direction it thinks is correct. But the ego is not you. The ego is simply a default program. It is not your soul. It is not your intuition. It is not the self, your truest essence. Jung made it very clear. The ego is not the master in its own house, meaning the ego thinks it's in control, but it's merely reacting to what lies beneath. The unconscious, the shadow, the pain that has not been healed. That is why Jung also said, we are not what we know, but what we are willing to learn. You are not what your ego knows. You are what your soul is unfolding into. The ego wants to protect you, but it is also what makes you suffer. The ego has two primary missions. Avoid being hurt. Prove that it is worthy. It whispers, don't let anyone see your weakness. Push harder. Don't lose face. You must succeed. But in trying to prove its worth, the ego creates pressure to be perfect, fear of failure, pain in comparison. Jung wrote, through pride we are ever deceiving ourselves. The ego is not bad. It is simply a child inside you, taught that worth must be earned. The ego and the fear of failure. The ego fears being wrong, fears being judged, fears not being enough. Have you ever wanted to do something deeply true to you, but then a voice said, what if I fail? That is ego trying to protect you from shame. But Jung reminds us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. You cannot awaken if you refuse to walk through the discomfort of being imperfect. The ego wants control. The soul wants freedom. Have you noticed? The ego is always tense. The self is always light. Ego wants a result. Self wants an experience. Ego wants to win. Self wants to understand. Ego demands certainty. Self embraces uncertainty. Jung said, where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. When we live from the self, mind and heart move together. The inner war ends. How to recognize when the ego is taking over? If you find yourself needing to be right, needing others' approval, never feeling good enough, then the ego is driving your life. But you do not need to defeat the ego. You only need to see it. Say to yourself, oh, this is my ego being afraid. In that exact moment, the ego no longer controls you. The first step beyond the ego, accepting that I am not my thoughts. Sit still. Close your eyes. Tell yourself, I am the observer, not the thought. The moment you observe a thought, you become consciousness. The ego is just a thought passing by. You don't need to silence it. You just don't follow it. The ego doesn't know how to let go. The self knows how to trust. There are things you try to control desperately. Love, career, the future. But Jung said, what you resist persists. This is not a manifestation quote. Jung used it in a psychoanalytic context. The more you resist an unconscious content, the stronger it becomes. When the ego fights life, life fights back. When the self accepts life, life opens. The ego is only one chapter in the journey of individuation. The most important lesson Jung wants us to understand: the ego is not the final destination of development. It is only the doorway. The goal is not to get rid of the ego, but to enlarge it and place it in service of the self. Jungian Analytic Principle, CW9II. In other words, we are not here to destroy the ego. We are here to put it in its rightful place. The ego is the driver. The self is the destination. Now we know the shadow is the rejected part. The persona is the social mask. The ego is the I that tries to control everything. But behind all these layers awaits a deeper journey: individuation, becoming who you were meant to be. The journey back to yourself. Not to the ego, not to the mask, but to wholeness. If you are ready for the most important stage of Jungian psychology, I'm here with you. Section 6, Individuation, becoming who you were meant to be. We have traveled through the key layers of the mind: shadow, the part you reject; persona, the mask you wear; ego, the small I that tries to control everything. And now, we enter the core of Jung's entire philosophy, the journey Jung believed every human must walk if they wish to become whole. He called it individuation. What is individuation? Individuation does not mean becoming more successful. It does not mean becoming perfect. It does not mean becoming the version other people want you to be. Individuation is the process of becoming yourself. Jung wrote, individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. You were not born to be a copy of anyone. You were born to become a one-of-a-kind being. Individuation is not adding, it is removing. Not adding achievements, not adding status, not adding expectations. It is removing everything that is not you. The persona falls. The ego steps back. The shadow steps into the light, until you finally see, this is me. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest privilege is not to be loved. It is to live in alignment with your soul. A process that hurts like birth. Individuation is not a comfortable journey. It demands that you face the truth. The truth that you are not happy in your current relationship. The truth that you are living the life others expect from you. The truth that you have lost joy trying to please everyone. Jung warned, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. Awakening has a price. The price is letting go of the beautiful illusions the ego created. You are not hurting because you are weak. You are hurting because your true self is trying to be born. Individuation always begins with a crisis. There comes a moment in life when everything you once took pride in suddenly feels empty. You succeed, yet you feel no joy. You are acknowledged, yet you feel lost. You achieve everything the ego wanted, yet you find no meaning. That is the soul calling you. Jung said, people will do anything no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Only when you finally stop and look inward, life truly begins. Individuation does not require you to be better. It requires you to be honest. Ask yourself, if I were not afraid of being judged, how would I live? That answer is you. You do not need to become the light. The light is already within you. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." What you are seeking was never outside. Individuation, reuniting all parts of you. In the deepest level of Jungian psychology lies a truth. You cannot grow if you divide yourself into fragments. You cannot choose only your strength and abandon your pain. You cannot choose only your kindness and reject your anger. You cannot choose only what is acceptable and deny what is human. To become whole, you must integrate shadow plus persona plus ego, self. Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good. The good person pleases others. The whole person makes peace with themselves." How does individuation happen? Not by trying to be better, but by becoming aware. See the shadow without judgment. Know that the persona is a mask, not your essence. 3. Ask the ego to step aside so the soul can lead. Individuation happens the moment you say, "I choose to live as myself, not as the version that makes others comfortable." Individuation does not lead you outward. It leads you back to yourself. Back to what makes you feel alive, what lights up your eyes, what you would do even if no one applauds. You stop asking, "What do people think of me?" You start asking, "Is this true to my soul?" That is freedom. The self, the final destination. Individuation leads you to the deepest part of you, the self. The self is not the ego. It is the center of the soul, the meeting point between reason and intuition, between who you became and who you were meant to be. Jung wrote, "The self is our life's goal, for it is the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality. The self is the destination. The ego is only the driver." A soft truth, but a liberating one. You do not need to become anyone else. You only need to return to yourself. Not be better, but release what is not you. The journey was never about finding yourself. It was about remembering who you already are. When the soul wants to speak to you, when the unconscious wants to send you a message, it does not speak in thoughts, it speaks in dreams. Dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Freud's quote, referenced by Jung in Analysis. In the next section, we step into a world where every symbol carries meaning, where the soul speaks in images. Section 7, Dreams, the language of your soul. We have just walked through the profound journey of individuation, the process of becoming yourself by integrating the shadow, the persona, and the ego. And in that journey, there is one doorway Jung considered the most direct path to the soul: dreams. Dreams are not meaningless. Dreams are the language of the soul, Freud once said. Dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Jung accepted that, but took it even further. He saw dreams as a communication system of the deep psyche. Jung wrote, "The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. A dream is not a symbol to decode. A dream is a message from a part of you that the conscious mind cannot reach, from your soul. Dreams show you what you refuse to see while awake. Have you noticed? During the day, you perform. At night, you are real. During the day, the ego controls. At night, the ego sleeps, and the self begins to speak. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." When you look outside, you dream. When you look inside, you awaken. Dreams force you to face what you avoid. It is not a coincidence that the most painful things appear in dreams. Every symbol in a dream has meaning. Dreams do not speak in logic. Dreams speak in symbols. A room equals a part of your psyche. A house equals the structure of your inner world. A dark forest equals where your shadow lives. A mysterious stranger equals an archetype emerging. Jung wrote, "The symbols of the dream come from the collective unconscious," meaning, dream symbols do not only come from personal experiences, but from the shared memory of humanity. You carry the language of thousands of generations within you. Why do we dream of strange things? Dreams compensate for the imbalance in your waking life. When you are too controlling, your dreams throw you into chaos. When you are too rational, your dreams drown you in emotion. When you deny the shadow, your dreams bring the shadow to you. Jung called this the compensation theory. Dreams do not entertain you. Dreams balance you. Dreams always tell the truth. You can lie to others. You can lie to yourself. But you cannot lie to the unconscious. Dreams are where the shadow speaks when you stay silent. Jung wrote, "The dream is a spontaneous self-portrayal, in symbolic form, of the actual situation in the unconscious." Dreams show exactly what is happening inside, the things you feel but refuse to face. Think about a recent dream you had. Maybe you dreamed that you were being chased, falling into a deep void, lost in a strange house, meeting someone you thought you forgot. That is not random. Every dream is a dialogue. If you are running away in the dream, you are running away from yourself. If you are falling, you are losing control in your waking life. If you are lost, you are disconnected from your true self. Dreams don't ask you for answers. They ask you to listen. Dreams are the doctor of the soul. Jung said, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." Dreams guide you by leading you back to the deepest parts of yourself. If you pay attention, dreams will show you what needs healing, what needs to be released, whom you need to let go of. Dreams are the medicine the unconscious gives you. How Jung interpreted dreams, not superstition. Dream interpretation in Jung's psychology is not about looking up a book to see, what does a snake mean? Jung did not believe dreams have a fixed meaning. A dream has one purpose, to make you whole. So instead of asking, "What does this mean?" ask, "What is this dream trying to tell me about myself?" Try this simple exercise. Before sleeping, place a notebook beside your bed. When you wake up, write down 3 things you remember from your dream. No need to understand it. No need to interpret it. just record it. Because Jung believed, the reason for dreams is not to reveal the future, but to help us live the present more fully. Dreams do not predict the future. Dreams heal the present. Where dreams lead you next in dreams, you meet familiar yet mysterious figures. A king, a guide, a hero, a villain, a mysterious stranger in the shadows. These are not random characters. They are archetypes, universal symbols of humanity, ancient patterns that live in the collective unconscious. We will enter that world in Section 8. Dreams are the language. Archetypes are the alphabet. If you want to understand why we keep dreaming of the same kinds of people, why certain symbols repeat across cultures and history, and why Jung believed we are all living inside the same myth, then step into the next chapter, Section 8, Archetypes, universal patterns living inside you. In the previous sections, we walked through dreams, the secret doorway into the unconscious. Jung said that dreams do not speak in words, they speak in images. But these images are not random and not chaotic. They appear again and again in every culture, every religion, every era. A man dreams of a guide. A woman dreams of an old house. A child dreams of a dragon. Why do the same symbols appear in the minds of millions of people across centuries and continents? Jung found the answer. Archetypes are the universal patterns and images that derive from the collective unconscious. Archetypes are primordial patterns embedded in the collective unconscious. Archetypes are not characters, they are living symbols. Archetypes are not movie characters, they are psychological patterns that every human being carries from birth. You don't learn to be the hero, you always knew how. Jung stated, the archetype is a tendency to form such representations of a motif, representations that can vary a great deal in detail without losing their basic pattern. Archetypes are not fixed images. They are the blueprint beneath the images. Why do we meet strange figures in our dreams? Because the soul is reminding you of a much bigger myth. Think of a recent dream, someone guiding you through darkness, someone blocking your path, someone appearing when you are lost. That is not a random person. That is an archetype. An archetype is a living pattern. In dreams, archetypes never speak in words, they act. The 8 major archetypes that often appear in the unconscious. There are hundreds of archetypes, but Jung studied the core ones that appear most often in dreams and in the journey of a human life. Here are the archetypes you have embodied at different moments. 1. The hero. The moment you declare, I must overcome this. Within you is a force that refuses to surrender, the part that rises after every failure. 2. The shadow. Not the enemy. The shadow is the part you reject. Everyone carries a shadow. The shadow may appear in dreams as a monster, a pursuer, a threatening stranger, not to frighten you, but to force you to see yourself. 3. The wise old man, wise woman, the mentor. In dreams, this appears as an old man, a silver-haired woman, a sage. This is ancient wisdom within you, the self speaking. 4. The child. The archetype of hope, rebirth, new beginnings. Jung called the child a symbol of the future. 5. The persona, the mask. The image you want others to see. The persona is a kind of mask. 6. The anima animus, inner feminine masculine. This archetype will be the focus of section 9, so we only touch it briefly here. Anima is the feminine within a man. Animus is the masculine within a woman. They appear in dreams as an alluring lover, an ex-partner, or a deeply magnetic figure. 7. The trickster. The chaotic force that disrupts your patterns and forces you to let go of control. 8. The self, the center of the soul. The final point of individuation. The self is our life's goal. When the self appears in dreams, you are nearing inner harmony. Archetypes live with us, but we don't always recognize them. In waking life, archetypes appear when you face a challenge, hero. You repeat emotional wounds, shadow. You find a mentor, wise old one. You meet someone who awakens your heart, anima, animus. In those moments, you feel like you're living inside a story. Because you are living inside a myth that archetypes have written long before you were born. Jung said, myths are the earliest form of psychology. We live our myth, whether we realize it or not. Archetypes are the images of your soul. We do not create archetypes. We replay them. When you stand up after being hurt, hero. When you face your pain, shadow. When you listen to intuition, wise guide. You do not dream of archetypes. Archetypes dream of you. Why do archetypes heal? Because archetypes reveal where you are on your inner journey, what is blocking you, what you are avoiding. When the hero appears, you're being called to courage. When the shadow appears, you must face what is denied. When the wise old one appears, you are on the right path. Jung wrote, "The unconscious creates reality. The unconscious shapes your life. Archetypes are how it guides you." So the real question is, which archetype are you living right now? Not to label yourself, but to recognize where you are in your own journey. If you feel lost, you may be inside the shadow chapter. If you feel transformation, you are moving toward the self. You are not failing. You are progressing in your myth. But there is one archetype so powerful that Jung wrote an entire volume just to explore it. That archetype is anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine. These inner energies shape how you love, how you relate, and how you see the world. If you're ready to enter the emotional depths, where love is not an accident, but an archetype guiding you, I'll walk there with you. Section 9. Anima and Animus, the inner feminine and masculine. In the previous section, we entered the world of archetypes, psychological patterns that exist within every human being. But there is one archetype so significant that Jung devoted years of his life to studying it, because it directly shapes our love, our emotions, our relationships, and even our path back to the self. That archetype is anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine. Each of us carries both the masculine and the feminine, not biologically, but psychologically within the soul. Jung wrote, "Every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, not the image of this or that particular woman, but a definite feminine image. That is the anima, the inner feminine living in the mind of a man." And conversely, Jung wrote, "The woman contains the masculine, the animus. That is the animus, the inner masculine within a woman. If the persona is the mask we show the world, then anima and animus are the mirrors we use to look at the people we love." The role of anima in a man. The anima represents the deepest emotional world of a man, not being fragile, as society mislabels it, but intuition, sensitivity, connection with the depth of the soul, creativity, the capacity to love. Jung wrote, "The anima is the archetype of life itself. When a man is disconnected from his anima, he becomes cold, excessively logical, emotionally avoidant, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of love. But when he integrates his anima, he becomes calm, attentive, expressive, emotionally grounded, inwardly magnetic. Not because he becomes weaker, but because he becomes whole." The role of animus in a woman. The animus represents strength, logic, and direction within a woman, not masculinization, but the ability to make decisions, set boundaries, protect herself, take action, pursue her goals. Jung wrote, "The animus corresponds to the paternal logos, just as the anima corresponds to the maternal eros." Anima, eros, connection, emotion, life. Animus, logos, clarity, direction, purpose. A woman who integrates her animus says no without guilt, does not confuse kindness with tolerance, doesn't seek validation from the outside. But when the animus is wounded, it becomes critical, controlling, rigid. I am always right. Anima, animus, and love. Why we fall for certain people. Jung said we do not fall in love with the real person. We fall in love with the image of them, the projection of our anima animus. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When we feel instant attraction, it is often because we have just met our own anima animus on the outside. We think we love them. In truth, we love the part of ourselves they awaken. Why do we get hurt in love? Because we don't see the person. We see the image we projected onto them. Jung called this projection, "We do not see others as they are, but as we are." Paraphrased from Jung's projection concept, CW9I. So when they stop fitting our projection, we suffer. Not because they changed, but because our illusion can no longer cover the truth. Jung's law of love. You do not attract the person you want. You attract the person you need, the one who reflects the wounds you haven't healed, brings your shadow to light, forces you to face what you avoid. A true relationship is not two perfect halves. It is two souls illuminated from within. Individuation and anima animus. In the individuation process, section 6, Jung said, "One becomes whole only when the inner opposites are united," derived from Jung's analysis in CW9I. You become whole only when you unite both poles within, logic and intuition, thinking and feeling, masculine and feminine, not choosing one, but balancing both. How to balance anima animus. Not with theory, with daily practice. Women need to allow themselves to feel, allow themselves to act, speak about emotions, boundaries, and say no. Stop controlling. Trunk just their own strength. Learn softness. Learn firmness. Or simply, men heal through surrender to emotion. Women heal through trusting their power. Anima, animus, the most important relationship of your life. Yes, your relationship with yourself shapes every relationship you have. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But once you do, you no longer love to fill a void. You love from wholeness." Now you know. Anima animus are the parts of yourself that you fall in love with. Archetypes guide your inner development. Dreams are how the unconscious communicates. So what happens when your inner symbols and the outer world begin to mirror each other? When you think of someone and they text you moments later? When a book appears right when you're wrestling with a decision? Jung called this synchronicity, when the universe whispers back. If you're ready to explore these meaningful coincidences, Section 10, Synchronicity, when the universe whispers back. In the previous section, we explored anima and animus, the inner masculine and feminine that shape love and relationships. And Jung asked a bold question. What happens when the inner world and the outer world touch? When you think of someone and they message you moments later? When you're torn between paths and a sign appears as if placed there? When you meet someone new, but it feels like you've known them forever? That is not coincidence. Jung called it synchronicity. What is synchronicity? Synchronicity is when meaningful events occur at the same time without a cause and effect relationship. You think of a symbol internally, and the external world responds in a way so precise that it forces you to pause. Jung defined it. Synchronicity is an acausal connecting principle. Not cause-effect, not linear logic, but a hidden connection. Synchronicity happens when the inner world matches the outer world. If archetypes and dreams are the language of the unconscious, then synchronicity is the universe's reply. Jung wrote, "We must be able to let things happen in the psyche. When you stop controlling, when the ego steps back, when you live closer to your true self, things begin to align. Not because you pushed, but because you became a match to what you seek." Think of a moment when you thought of someone and they appeared, kept seeing the same symbol, noticed the same word repeating everywhere. That isn't attention bias. It is the language of the unconscious. When you direct your energy somewhere, your reality moves with it. Jung believed that the psyche and matter are two different aspects of one and the same thing. Mind and matter are not separate. You and the world are not separate. You influence reality far more than you think. A true story of Jung. During a therapy session, Jung worked with a deeply skeptical patient. a woman who rejected anything emotional or symbolic. One day, she told Jung she dreamt of a golden scarab, a rare beetle in that region. At that moment, Jung heard tapping on the window. He opened it. A golden beetle flew into the room. Jung recorded, "It was the scarab, the Egyptian symbol of rebirth." The woman burst into tears, not because of the beetle, but because her soul was touched. There was no explanation, no cause and effect, only meaning. Synchronicity appears when 1. You are standing at the threshold of transformation. 2. Ego releases control and the self leads. 3. You stop living from fear and start living from intuition. Jung said, "Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. When thought and feeling unite, you become synchronized with the universe." Synchronicity is not magic. It is a consequence of awakening. You cannot force synchronicity. You can only become someone who notices it. Synchronicity appears when you are willing to listen, quiet enough to see, honest enough to follow your truth. It is the unconscious whispering, "You are on the right path." Signs are not to make you dependent, but to help you trust your journey. As you start living authentically, you notice the right people arrive, opportunities open, the path becomes clearer, not by accident. The unexpected and the incredible belong in this world. Only then is life whole. Life becomes whole when you allow the unexpected. Why others call it magic, but Jung called it a hidden connection. Most people see with their eyes. Jung saw with the soul. You attract what you become. You notice what you recognize. Synchronicity says, life does not move when you chase it. Life moves when you are ready. Synchronicity is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for Jung's greatest discovery. There is a level of consciousness that connects all humans, not metaphorically, psychologically. Symbolically, Jung called it the collective unconscious, the shared memory of humanity. If you want to understand why humans across cultures dream the same symbols, why we connect without words, and why you sometimes look at someone and feel as if you've met them before, we will explore that in the next section. Section 11. The collective unconscious, the shared memory of humanity. If you are ready to dive deeper into the level of consciousness Jung described as the root of the human soul, then take a breath. In the previous section, we touched synchronicity, those rare moments when the outer world and the inner world align, as if the universe nods back at you. But Jung realized that synchronicity is only the surface of a much deeper truth. There exists a layer of consciousness that does not belong to any individual. It belongs to all of humanity. Jung called it the collective unconscious. Beneath the personal self, there is a shared psyche. Your personal unconscious contains memories, emotions, and experiences that belong to you. But beneath that, far deeper, Jung discovered something revolutionary. The collective unconscious is the inherited part of the psyche. The collective unconscious is not inherited from your parents, but from every human being who has ever lived, an invisible library containing the primal fears of humanity, ancient symbols, repeated story patterns throughout history, The archetypes we explored in Section 8.
No one teaches you to fear the dark. That fear was already there.
No one teaches you to love a newborn baby. That love was already there. No one teaches you to recognize sincerity in someone's eyes. That intuition was already there.
These things come from a place deeper than anything the rational mind can reach.
We are not alone inside our minds. As a young psychoanalyst, Jung wondered, why do people from different cultures, who have never met, dream the same symbols? In Africa, people dream of snakes. In the Philippines, spirit guardians. In ancient Scandinavia, guiding spirits. These symbols, stories, and myths did not come from books or society. Jung realized, the psyche is not of today. It reaches back into prehistoric ages. Your soul comes from thousands of years before you were born. You don't just carry your ancestors' genes, you carry their memories. Example, the feeling of déjà vu. Have you ever felt, I've been here before? Not because you remember, but because an archetype in the collective unconscious recognizes something familiar. Many researchers working with Jungian theory suggest that déjà vu is the moment when the collective unconscious matches the present experience. It is as if the soul whispers, I knew this before the mind knew this. We are not just individuals. We are pieces of a greater whole. When Jung worked with psychiatric patients, he noticed that they drew wheel-shaped sun symbols, spiral mandalas, serpent gods holding scepters. Yet they had never seen these symbols before in their lives. Jung concluded, the collective unconscious consists of pre-existent forms, the archetypes. Archetypes are not learned. They are inborn. It is as if the human soul was programmed with a shared symbolic language. Why do we feel connected to someone in seconds? You look at someone, at an airport, a cafe, and within 3 seconds, you feel them. No words. No explanation, just a silent knowing. You look into their eyes, and your soul says, I know you. That is the collective unconscious, connecting to the collective unconscious. Jung believed that the intense bond between strangers is proof that we belong to each other at a level deeper than language and form. We live myths we don't know we're living. Jung wrote, myths are the first form of psychology. Myths are ancient psychology. Think about the universal story. A young hero leaves home, faces trials, enters the darkness, meets a guide, discovers inner strength, returns transformed. It is not only Harry Potter, Star Wars, or The Matrix. It is the blueprint of the soul. And you are living that blueprint every single day. You are not living a separate life. You are continuing the journey of humanity. The fears you carry, the desires you hide, the dreams you chase, they are not just yours. They are echoes of millions of souls who walked before you. Jung wrote, we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Every person you meet, every challenge you face, every repeating cycle you struggle with, is a lesson the soul brought with it from long before you were born. How does the collective unconscious help us heal? When you realize you are not the only one who hurts, you are not the only one who fears, you are not the only one who feels lost. You stop judging yourself.
You begin to accept who you are. And that is when the ego releases its grip. The soul begins to speak.
From the collective unconscious, we move into the center of the soul. Everything so far has been leading you here. Shadow, persona, ego, individuation, archetypes, anima, animus, synchronicity. Each piece is part of one picture. That picture is the self. Jung described the self as the center and circumference of the whole psyche.
The self is the center of your spiritual journey.
When you reach the self, you no longer try to control life. You align with it. If the collective unconscious is the ocean, then the self is the pearl resting at the bottom. To reach the self, you must descend through every layer we've explored. In the next section, we enter the heart of Jung's entire system. Section 12. The Self, the center of your inner universe. We have walked a long journey from the shadow, persona, ego, through individuation, past the symbolic world of archetypes, into synchronicity, and finally, the collective unconscious.
All of them lead to one point, the self.
If the personal unconscious is a small ocean and the collective unconscious is the vast ocean, then the self is the guiding star at the center of the inner universe. Jung wrote, "The self is the archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the psyche." The self is not the ego. The self is your wholeness. The self is not who you become. The self is who you have always been. The ego is what you construct to function in society. Labels, achievements, roles, identity. But the self existed before the ego.
Jung described it.
The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious. The self is the center, but also the whole. The self is the meeting point of consciousness, the unconscious, the soul. Ego says, "I am what I think." Self says, "I am everything I have not yet known." The self is home. Have you ever felt this? Moments when peace suddenly appears for no logical reason. Not because you achieved something, not because someone praised you, but because you felt aligned with yourself. That is the self speaking. Ego needs validation. Self needs truth. Ego asks, "What do others think of me?" Self asks, "Is this true to my soul?" The self is the inner guide. The self does not shout. The self does not force. The self feels. And if you are silent long enough, you can hear it. A gut knowing, a clarity in the chest, a whisper. This is not yours to carry. Jung wrote, "The self is our life's goal, for it is the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality." The self is the goal of life, not success, not perfection, wholeness. To meet the self, you must go beyond the ego. Ego hates uncertainty. The self lives comfortably within it. Ego seeks certainty. The self seeks experience. Ego fears failure. The self explores. Ego tries to control life. The self allows life to unfold. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows. When the ego resists, pain grows. When the self accepts, the journey begins. The self appears in the simplest moments, not in glory or applause, but in deeply human moments. When you say no for the first time, when you cry without shame, when you let go of a relationship that exhausts your soul, when you follow a passion no one understands. The self appears every time you are honest with yourself. Ego tries to become someone. Self wants to return home. The self is union. Jung realized that the self is the reconciliation of opposites within us. Logic and emotion, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. The self is where these opposites stop fighting. Jung wrote, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. You do not need to choose between strong or vulnerable, rational or emotional, kind or assertive. You can be all of it. The self is the end, but also the beginning. Individuation, Section 6, is the journey toward the self, from fragmentation into unity. But the paradox is, when you reach the self, you have not arrived. You begin. You begin to live a life not driven by fear, not shaped by past wounds, but guided by your inner truth. The journey of life is about becoming conscious." Jungian interpretation based on CW11 and CW13. Life is about awakening, not adding more to your life, but seeing what has always been there. The self is not a destination. The self is a state of being. You meet the self when you accept the shadow, the parts you hide. Smile at the persona, the mask you wear. Let the ego sit in the back seat. Listen to archetypes in your dreams. Realize synchronicity is not random. Feel the collective unconscious in your bones. When all of these are integrated, the self reveals itself. You do not find the self. You remember the self. How does the self change the way you live? You stop living to prove. You start living to experience. You no longer panic about losing people. You know that those who stay belong to your journey. You no longer fear missing out. You know what is meant for you will find you. You no longer try to control the future. You trust life. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You are what you choose to become, not what happened to you. You have reached the center of your soul. You have touched the self. And Jung believed that when a human being meets the self, something extraordinary becomes possible. We can speak to the unconscious directly, not through dreams, not through symbols, but through a conversation. Jung called this method active imagination, a conversation with the unknown. Section 13, active imagination, a conversation with the unknown. If you are ready to step into a conversation with the deepest part of yourself, we now enter active imagination. In the previous section, we arrived at the deepest point in Jungian psychology, the self, the center of the entire inner system. And if the self is the lighthouse, then active imagination is the path that leads you there. If dreams are how the unconscious speaks to you, active imagination is how you speak back to the unconscious. What is active imagination? This is not random imagination,
not daydreaming, not fantasy. Active imagination is a conscious dialogue between you and the unconscious. Jung defines it: active imagination is the direct way to the unconscious. In dreams, the unconscious leads. In active imagination, you walk with it. Why did Jung create this method? Not to study the psyche, but to save himself. During the period when Jung broke away from Freud, he fell into a deep psychological crisis. He dreamed intensely, intuition sharpened, and strange images flooded into his awareness. He said, "I was in the midst of a total collapse." Instead of running away from fear, Jung did what most of us never dare to do. He entered a dialogue with his own darkness. How active imagination works, how Jung practiced it. No complicated rituals, no advanced meditation skills. You simply, 1. SMS it down. Close your eyes. 2. Focus on the image or emotion arising within. 3. Don't coddle it, control it. Let the image lead. 4. Talk to it. You can ask, "Who are you? What are you trying to tell me? What do I need to learn from you?" Jung wrote, "Sit with the image and watch it carefully. Don't try to force it. Simply let it happen." Paraphrased from Jung's instructions in The Red Book. If the shadow appears, talk to it. If an archetype shows up, listen. This is not playing with imagination. This is a conversation with the soul. Active imagination is not about controlling images. It is about allowing the images to come alive. Jung described, "I let myself drop. I allow the images to emerge." And something strange happens. When you stop controlling the mind begins to lead you where you need to go. Why does active imagination heal? Because when a part of you has been buried, the shadow, a childhood wound, the fear of abandonment, it will speak through tension, anxiety, insecurity, sudden anger. But when you are willing to dialogue with it, you stop being the fugitive. You become the guide. Jung said, "The meeting with oneself is the first test of courage on the path of inner development." Active imagination helps you see clearly what the ego has suppressed for years. A real dialogue from Jung. In the Red Book, Jung describes an intense conversation with a figure from his unconscious. He called it the meeting with the soul. He writes, "My soul, where are you?" This was not addressed to the mind, but to the soul. Imagine Jung sitting alone, listening to the darkness, asking, "What do you want me to do?" Not science, not logic. It was surrender to the part of himself he could not explain. What active imagination does for you. It helps you recognize the shadow, integrate the persona, release trapped emotions, understand the archetypes influencing your life, move closer to the self. If individuation is the journey home, active imagination is the conversation along the way. Example: when anger appears, you do not suppress it. You say, "Hello, anger. What are you trying to protect?" And you may hear, "I'm angry because you never protect yourself." That is the voice of the shadow, and active imagination transforms it. Simple exercise. You can do it tonight. Before sleep, try 1. Sit still for 3 minutes. Do nothing. 2. Nest your eyes and let an image appear. 3. Don't force it. 4. Ask, what do you need me to know? You will be surprised by the answer. When does active imagination show up in life? When you feel stuck in the same cycle. When relationship patterns repeat. When you know you must change, but don't know where to start. And suddenly, a symbol or intuition rises. You just know what to do. Not logically, but from deep knowing. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Active imagination leads you there. You don't need to understand everything to begin. Active imagination does not require answers. It requires courage. Courage to sit with yourself. Courage to look at what you've avoided. Courage to say, I am ready to hear you. Why does it matter? Because the modern world teaches us to rush, perform, live on the surface. Active imagination teaches us to listen, connect, live from within. This is not a quick fix. This is a return to the soul. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. We have just entered the direct dialogue with the unconscious. But Jung discovered something else, something profound. Real transformation happens only when a person goes through suffering. It is not suffering that strengthens you, but how you understand and communicate with it. Section 14, Suffering and Transformation, Why Pain Has Meaning. And if you are ready to find meaning in the wounds of your life, after learning how to speak to the unconscious through active imagination, we come face to face with an undeniable truth. The journey of becoming yourself is never a smooth path. It goes through pain. It is no accident that Jung wrote, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain. There is no awakening without discomfort. Pain is the alarm bell of the soul." Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the teacher. We grow up in a culture that teaches us happiness is good, pain is bad. But Jung saw it differently. He believed that suffering is a sacred part of transformation. Suffering is not an illness. It is the normal counterpole to happiness. You cannot understand light until you have walked through darkness. You cannot know who you are until you have been broken. Pain comes when the soul wants you to look. Many people ask, why do I have to go through this? Why is life so unfair to me? Jung would answer, nothing is random. Every pain is an expression of the unconscious trying to be heard. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Meaning, if you avoid facing the real pain, your psyche will create another kind of suffering to force you to face it. We don't suffer because life wounds us. We suffer because we have not understood the message inside the wound. Every wound is a doorway. Pain may show up as loss, betrayal, loneliness, or failure. But from Jung's perspective, pain is a symbol. Every wound is a doorway, opening to the part of your soul you abandoned. Jung reflected the same idea expressed in ancient wisdom. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Often attributed to Rumi, Jung repeatedly echoed this idea in CW 10, CW 11. You cannot enter the light without passing through the wound. because that is where ego cracks and the self finally has room to emerge. Pain does not destroy you, it strips you. When everything collapses, ego desperately wants to go back to normal, but the self whispers, "No, you cannot go back. You are becoming someone new." Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Accepting yourself, shadow, wounds, mistakes and all, is the first threshold of transformation. Transformation is a gentle death. Jung compared inner growth to a symbolic death of the old self. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Pain is not chaos. It is a secret order you cannot see yet. Every time you break, you are being rearranged into a deeper, truer, more alive version of yourself. Why do we resist pain? Because we fear losing control. Ego hates ambiguity. Ego wants a quick recovery. I want to feel better now. But the soul doesn't need you to get over the pain. It needs you to stay with the pain long enough to hear what it says. Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. We run from the soul by staying busy, consuming more, or numbing ourselves. But pain, like a patient friend, waits until we are ready to listen. The soul's melting process. In alchemy, a symbol Jung deeply studied, there is a stage called nigredo, darkness, decomposition, dissolution. Jung saw it as the metaphor for psychological healing. In the alchemical sense, suffering is the fire that purifies the soul. You cannot turn base metal into gold without fire. You cannot become conscious without suffering. Nigredo is not the end. It is the beginning of rebirth. Pain plus consciousness equals transformation. Pain is only a tragedy if you refuse to understand it. When you bring awareness to pain, it becomes fuel for growth. Jung called this the process of transformation. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You do not awaken by avoiding your darkness. You awaken by acknowledging it. Pain, meaning, return to self. When you dare to face your pain, you realize it never came to destroy you. It came to expand you. Every heartbreak teaches you how to love deeper. Every loss teaches you how to appreciate more. Every failure teaches you how to live authentically. Ultimately, Jung said, the purpose of life is not happiness, but meaning. And pain is the doorway to meaning. When the soul has passed through fire, when ego dissolves, when shadow is seen, and the self begins to speak, you return, not as who you were, but as who you truly are. This is the final stage in the Jungian journey, coming home, returning to your deepest self. Section 15. Coming home. Returning to your deepest self. We have reached the final part of the journey. Not an ending, a return. After shadow, the rejected parts. Persona, the mask. Ego, the small I. Individuation, the journey inward. Archetypes, the language of the soul. Dreams, the voice of the unconscious. Synchronicity, the universe whispering back. Active imagination, the dialogue with the unknown, and suffering and transformation, rebirth through pain. You now stand in front of the final doorway, returning to yourself. Coming home is not discovering, it is remembering. All your life, you were taught to move forward, achieve, conquer, prove. Ego pushes you to run faster, go farther, become the person society wants. But the soul doesn't care about achievements. It only cares about truth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The privilege of living is not to be loved. The privilege is to be yourself. The return begins when you stop searching. We spend years believing something is missing: success, validation, love. But on this journey you realize you are not missing anything. You are only covered. Pain, expectations, fear, comparison, like dust on a mirror. The self was always there. You simply couldn't see it. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." We dream when we look outward. We awaken when we look inward. Coming home does not require perfection, only honesty. In youth, we try to become someone. In maturity, we learn to let go. We learn to stop pleasing everyone, to stop proving our worth, to stop wearing masks just to be loved. Because at some point, you finally understand. Real love only arrives when you are real. No more performing, no more pretending. Once you awaken, you cannot go back. Here is the paradox. Once you begin to awaken, you can no longer tolerate the life you used to live. Shallow conversations no longer interest you. You stop forcing connection with people who cannot meet your soul. You no longer need applause to feel worthy. Silence becomes comforting. An evening alone becomes a sanctuary. Jung said, "Solitude is not the absence of company, but the moment when the soul is free to speak to us." Compiled from Jung's letters and notes. Loneliness is not being without people. Loneliness is the moment the soul finally has space to speak. Coming home requires courage. Courage to admit what no longer resonates. Leave relationships that drain your soul. Release the old identity you've clung to for too long. That is the courage of someone who chooses truth over approval. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. It is not your responsibility to live someone else's dream. It is your responsibility to live your own." Coming home is not becoming someone. It is realizing you never lost yourself. One day, you stop, and you finally see you never had to become anyone to be worthy of love. You never needed to succeed to deserve respect. You never needed perfection to be enough. You only needed to be you. The symbol of return, the mandala. Throughout the Red Book, Jung repeatedly drew circles, mandalas. He noticed they appeared when his inner world felt the most chaotic. The circle revealed something. The self is always at the center. No matter how many loops life spins you through, the center stays still. Jung wrote, "The self is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere." The self is not outside of you. The self is you, whole, unfragmented, unafraid. This is the moment you return. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Let go of the judgment, the comparison, the pressure to be perfect. You don't need to be like anyone else. You only need to return to your own rhythm. And if Jung wanted you to carry only one message from this entire journey, it would be this: I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You are not your pain. You are your becoming. When you come home to yourself, life comes home to you. From this moment forward, you no longer chase validation. You no longer abandon yourself. You no longer run after love, because you finally found the real home within yourself. And when you are at home in your soul, everything else finds its place. Life doesn't ask you to be perfect. It invites you to return to the truth of who you are. Thank you for walking this Jungian journey all the way to the end. Not everyone is brave enough to look within, but you did. Sleep deeply. Rest fully. Return to yourself. More and more each day. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Good night. You are home.